The jewels are mine," Vivien whispered to her pals, loud enough for most of the burial room to hear. Gramma only left her old cookbooks. I felt my face flush with embarrassment as several family members turned to gaze at me pityingly as the sound of her voice sliced through my anguish like a dagger. While my sister Vivien did not try to conceal her delight at what she saw to be her superior legacy, I sat in the front row of the church in Birmingham, Alabama, holding tight to the battered recipe box that my grandmother had expressly asked me to receive. I'm Selena Parker, and I believe that, at age 32, I knew my family well enough to demand this kind of treatment. Vivien had been the golden child for as long as I could remember, the one who was praised for just showing up while I put in endless hours in the background. That relationship was being played out one last time today during our grandmother's burial, and I could feel the familiar ache of being written off as the inferior daughter. "Poor Selena," Aunt Dorothy said to her husband, and I heard it. "Always got the short end of the stick, even in death." My sister's eyes glowed with victory as she adjusted the pricey black dress she had purchased especially for today, while Vivien's friends smiled softly. The difference between us couldn't have been more pronounced. She had just arrived from Atlanta yesterday, her first trip to Birmingham in over 6 months, and she carried herself as though she anticipated leaving considerably richer. "At least the jewelry collection will be worth something substantial," Vivien had told anyone who would listen at the viewing the night before, while she sat there surrounded by admirers and I sat alone with a collection of yellowed index cards and handwritten recipes for desserts and casseroles. During our last conversation 3 weeks ago, Grandma had an unusual gleam in her eyes when she made me promise to take care of the cookbooks. Grandma always said those pieces were family heirlooms, and some of them are probably worth thousands of dollars. I had said nothing at the time, just as I don't now, but something about her last wishes felt different. She had gripped my hand with a surprising amount of strength for someone so weak. "Promise me, sweetheart," she had whispered, "that you will cherish every single recipe in that box." Vivien was practically pulsing with excitement as the funeral director got ready to lead everyone to the lawyer's office for the will reading. As we filed out of the church, I noticed that she kept looking at the recipe box in my hands with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction, as if my inheritance was evidence of my position in the family hierarchy. She had already planned how she would sell the more valuable pieces, keeping only her favorites for herself. Our family had developed a distinct pattern over the years that led up to this point, and Vivien's actions today felt like the inevitable conclusion to a lifetime of neglect and favoritism. I had stayed in Birmingham and centered my life on taking care of the people who were most important to me, while she had moved to Atlanta after college to pursue her marketing career, only coming home for significant holidays and special occasions. For the past 5 years, I've driven the 20 minutes from my apartment in the downtown area to my grandmother's home on the south side of the city every Tuesday and Thursday to assist her with doctor's visits, grocery shopping, and other aging-related tasks. Grandma had told me over and over again over the years that you're the only one who really cares about preserving family traditions, and I had spent many afternoons sitting at her kitchen table learning the family recipes that had been handed down through the generations while Vivien sent Christmas cards and made quick phone calls on birthdays. Those afternoons had become precious to me, not because I particularly enjoyed cooking, but because they represented the only time I felt truly valued by someone in my family. Vivien is too busy with her vital work to bother with an elderly woman's recipes. Grandma would pull out her recipe box and show me how to make her famous Sunday pot roast or her celebrated apple pie, making sure I wrote down every step in my own handwriting. She would say that recipes are about more than just ingredients, they are about connection, love, and memory. Vivien, on the other hand, had always viewed these visits as evidence of my modest goals. "Are you still playing housewife with Grandma?" she would inquire each time she called while I was there. "Do you not have other things to do with your time?" Her tone implied that I had the sophisticated priorities that had brought her to the big city for work and that my adherence to family customs was somehow embarrassing. This relationship had always been reinforced by our parents, who praised Vivien's professional accomplishments while dismissing my employment as a social worker as a passing phase that I would soon outgrow. "How soon will you discover something more substantial?" At family gatherings, my father would inquire, "You're still handling other people's issues while Vivien is already moving up the corporate ladder." During the preceding year, while Grandma had been declining, the partiality had been most noticeable. Vivien had helped with a few pricey flower arrangements and sporadic phone calls, but I had handled her medical care, set up home health services, and spent my weekends organizing decades' worth of accumulated possessions. She had, however, managed to hold on to her status as the family's success story, the daughter whose achievements were praised while my sacrifices were ignored. I could now feel the burden of those years of rejection as we made our way to the attorney's office. While I silently followed after, wondering if Grandma's last act would further solidify my status as the forgotten daughter, Vivien strode confidently beside her pals, already talking about her plans for the inheritance. In downtown Birmingham, the lawyer's office took up the third story of a historic building. The heavy leather furnishings and mahogany-paneled walls created a sedative environment that seemed fitting for the event. After more than 20 years of managing our family's legal matters, Mr. Harrison's gentle gaze had a blend of professional empathy and an unidentified quality. Upon our arrival in the conference room, Vivien took a prominent place at the head of the table, accompanied by her friends who had traveled from Atlanta for what they obviously anticipated to be a joyous occasion. Feeling like a spectator at someone else's crucial meeting, I sat down by the window, still holding on to the recipe box. Our expectations couldn't have been more different, and Vivien exuded entitlement and confidence. All I wanted was to finish the reading without experiencing any more humiliation. "Thank you for your presence today, ladies and gentlemen." Mr. Harrison opened the large binder that held Grandma's will and adjusted his spectacles before continuing. "Margaret Ann Patterson was a great woman who carefully considered her estate's distribution." I saw her companions exchange knowing looks as Vivien leaned forward excitedly. During the journey from Atlanta, they had clearly talked about what they expected, presumably figuring out the worth of different pieces and organizing a shopping spree to celebrate Vivien's good fortune. They seemed to find it amusing that I had been given a box of old recipes as a consolation prize, and I noticed a few poorly disguised smiles aimed at me. The lawyer went on to say that the main bequests are simple. "I give my whole jewelry collection, including everything I inherited from my own mother and grandmother, as well as my personal savings account, which has around $15,000 in it, to my granddaughter, Vivien Patterson Hughes." In fact, Vivien clapped her hands together in delight as her smile grew. Grandma spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, and I knew she knew who truly deserved the family jewels. Her friends whispered, "Congratulations," and I felt the familiar ache of being overlooked, even though I'd tried to prepare myself for this moment. Mr. Harrison went on to say to my granddaughter, Selena Patterson, "I leave my recipe collection, along with all of the handwritten cards and the wooden box they're kept in, as well as any other cooking and food preparation supplies that might be discovered among my belongings." Several family members exchanged pitying glances as I observed the obvious disappointment in the room. Vivien did not try to conceal her joy, and Aunt Dorothy went over to give me a comforting slap on the shoulder. However, I observed something unexpected as I looked at Mr. Harrison's face. "Well, at least you'll always be able to make a good casserole," she remarked with false kindness, sparking another wave of hardly contained laughter from her admirers. His face was not one of pity or regret, but rather of repressing what appeared to be almost a sense of anticipation, as though the true reason for today's meeting had not yet been disclosed, and the way he handled the folder indicated that there were more papers, more surprises that no one in the room had thought of. But there are other clauses in Margaret Patterson's will that need to be explained, especially in light of the, shall we say, exceptional character of Miss Selena's inheritance, Mr. Harrison stated, his voice adopting a more professional tone that instantly attracted everyone's attention. I could feel my blood speed, but I couldn't figure out why. His mood had changed subtly but definitely. Whereas he had seemed to be giving routine facts moments before, there was now an energy in his voice that suggested something important was about to happen. "What do you mean by unique?" Vivien, who had been enjoying her friend's congratulations, looked perplexed. "What do you mean by unique?" she said, her voice harsh with skepticism. "They're just old recipe cards. What's there to explain?" Mr. Harrison responded, "Well, that's where things become quite fascinating," pulling out a second, bigger folder from his briefcase. "Miss Hughes, your grandmother was a very intelligent woman. She worked with me for almost 2 years to make sure her most valuable assets would go to the grandchild who had shown the most authentic character and the greatest dedication to family." There was silence in the room. I could sense that everyone was watching me, but they weren't sympathetic glances anymore. Rather, there was perplexity, interest, and, in Vivien's case, the first glimmer of concern. Her companions had ceased their jubilant muttering and were now leaning forward with curiosity. I managed to say, "I don't understand," in a voice that was just audible above a whisper. "What assets? Grandmother led a simple life. What else could there be but her savings and the jewelry?" That's when Mr. Harrison smiled, and it was a grin of real warmth and, I suppose, expectation. "Your grandma had a lot more than anyone in your family knew, Miss Patterson. She has made a number of extremely smart real estate investments in Birmingham and the neighboring areas during the last 15 years. A tiny shopping center that brings in a lot of money each month, 2 business buildings, and 6 rental units." Like a physical force, the words slammed into the room. Vivien's mouth dropped open in disbelief, and her face turned pale. "It's not possible," she stumbled. "Grandma never brought up real estate. For 40 years, she resided in the same modest home. How could she be the owner of rental homes?" The attorney clarified, "Your grandmother was very private about her investments. While secretly amassing a sizable real estate portfolio, she chose to let others believe she was living on a modest pension. Right now, the homes are worth about $4. They make about $35,000 a month from renting out $2 million. I was lightheaded. The figures were improbable, unreal. My grandmother had been a billionaire, clipping coupons and buying groceries at a discount, and worrying about how she was going to pay for her prescription drugs. "But why didn't she tell me?" I inquired, finding it difficult to comprehend this insight. She wanted to see which granddaughter would value family customs and real connections over material expectations. And she wanted to safeguard her assets in a way that would guarantee they went to the right person, so why keep it a secret? Mr. Harrison said, opening the recipe box I had been holding throughout the meeting. As he started to take recipe cards out of the box, I saw that they were not your typical index cards. Each one was thicker than regular paper, had a more formal aspect, and was adorned with what appeared to be official stamps and signatures in addition to the handwritten recipes. He turned to face me and added, "Miss Patterson, each recipe card in this box is also a valid property deed. I worked with your grandma for months to develop this technique. With the legal property transfer paperwork on one side and the culinary instructions on the other, each recipe is specific to one of her properties." The room was completely silent. As I tried to understand what Mr. Harrison was saying, I gazed at the recipe card that was laid out on the conference table, each seemingly innocuous index card, adorned with Grandma's recognizable handwriting and yellowed with age, symbolized hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property. Vivien's voice rose in alarm as she said, "This can't be real. Are you implying that she passed off property deeds as recipes? That is absurd. There is no legal rationale for it." Mr. Harrison, on the other hand, responded coolly. "Legally, it makes perfect sense. For more than 2 years, your grandma worked with my firm to make sure all the paperwork was completed and recorded correctly. Each recipe card includes the legal text required to give Miss Selena ownership of the related property as well as the actual cooking instructions your grandma used." Taking one of the cards, he gave it to me. "For example, your grandmother's apple pie recipe is in this one. The deed transferring title of the commercial building on 20th Street South, which is currently leased to a medical practice and brings in $4,800 a month in rental income, can be found on the backside." As I turned the card over, my hands shook. As expected, there was voluminous legal paperwork outlining property lines, transfer terms, and my name is the new owner underneath the well-known recipe for Margaret's renowned apple pie. It was clearly authentic, with the notary stamp and the official county seal. The lawyer picked up another card and went on, the recipe for beef stew. The duplex on Highland Avenue is the equivalent. In 5 points, the 4-unit apartment complex is represented by the chocolate chip cookies. Over the years, every dish your grandma taught you constituted both a legal transfer of significant wealth and a cooking lesson. Vivien got to her feet so suddenly that her chair tipped back. She yelled, her poise totally shattered, "This is crazy. She can't just conceal property transfers totaling millions of dollars. I will challenge this. Legal action must be an option." Despite Vivien's outburst, Mr. Harrison's voice remained professional as he replied, "Actually, your grandma expected that response. That's why she kept such detailed records. This letter is another." He gave me an envelope containing my name in Grandma's meticulous handwriting, along with a 3-page letter that started with the words I had longed to hear all my life. "My dearest Selina, you are the grandchild who really knew what family meant." The letter explained exactly why Grandma had decided on this inheritance plan, and I read it out loud, my voice getting louder with each phrase. She talked about my years of loyalty, my sincere interest in family customs, and my personality as someone who prioritized relationships over material gain. And she compared Vivien's actions, noting her lack of visits, her contempt for family recipes, and her clear interest in financial inheritance over emotional ties. The letter went on to say, "I kept a close eye on both of my granddaughters, and I could see that Selina would cherish these recipes for the love and history they held, not for their monetary worth. In addition to making sure that my holdings would be handled responsibly and that my family would always come first, I planned my inheritance to reward true loyalty." The letter ended with detailed instructions for every property, including information about the present tenants, rental contracts, and Grandma's wishes for me to carry on her legacy of giving working families in Birmingham high-quality housing. Vivien's companions had fallen silent, gazing in evident disbelief at what was happening in front of them. While the sister she had made fun of had inherited a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, the woman they had come to congratulate on her inheritance now had to face the fact that she had received jewelry that might have been worth $50,000. "No," answered Vivien, her voice cracking as the full extent of her error in judgment became evident. "This is unfair. I'm the one who has the career, the connections, and the success. Selina simply stayed here and played house with an elderly woman. She doesn't deserve millions of dollars because of that." Her companions shuffled uneasily in their seats, uncertain whether to stand by her side or turn away from her growing embarrassment. "Miss Hughes," Mr. Harrison remarked firmly, the celebration they had been looking forward to had turned into a public breakdown, and I could see them exchanging uncertain glances as Vivien's facade of sophistication completely collapsed. "Based on years of observing both grandchildren, your grandma made her choice because she appreciated Miss Selina's regular attendance, her sincere concern, and her respect for family customs." I was still processing the enormity of what had just happened, but one thing was becoming very clear: I had spent every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon at Grandma's house. Her choice of method for transferring her assets reflects her belief that the most significant inheritances aren't always the most obvious ones. Every recipe I'd meticulously transcribed into my own handwriting, and every discussion about cooking methods and family history had all been a part of a complex test. And somehow, without realizing it, I'd passed the Sunday pot roast recipe. Grandma made me practice this a lot, so it was always my favorite. I murmured softly, taking up another card and looking at both sides. Mr. Harrison confirmed that the recipe matches the shopping area on Green Springs Highway. It is fully occupied and brings in about $12,000 a month in rental revenue. Your grandma bought it 8 years ago and spent a lot of time refurbishing it to draw in great tenants. She misled me, she murmured, making me believe that the jewelry was the valuable bequest. That Selina was receiving scraps while I was receiving the treasure. And Vivien dropped back into her chair, her face white with shock and anger. As reality sunk in, I found my voice and added, "Your grandmother didn't deceive anyone. She just gave each of us exactly what we valued most. You desired material wealth that you could flaunt and sell. The lawyer started putting the recipe cards back in their box, but now each one felt precious in a whole new way. I wanted connection, tradition, and family history. She made sure we each got what we really cared about. Miss Patterson, you will also need to review other documents, such as current lease agreements, property management recommendations, and tax information. Your grandmother has left you a lot of money, but she has also left you the burden of upholding her reputation as a responsible and equitable landlord. The room had changed entirely as Vivien and her companions were getting ready to leave. Instead of coming in expecting victory, they were leaving in stunned quiet. Vivien stopped at the door, staring back at me with a mix of incredulity and rage. Although her voice lacked conviction, she stated, "This isn't over," adding, "I'll find a way to challenge this. It's unfair to give everything to someone who has never done anything." Mr. Harrison actually made a quiet interjection. What your grandmother cherished most was exactly what Miss Selina achieved. She arrived. She was concerned. She paid attention. She upheld family customs because she recognized their value, not because she anticipated compensation. Those, your grandma says, are the greatest achievements of all. I sat by myself with the lawyer and the recipe box that had just completely transformed my life as the door shut behind them. Realizing at last that neither the money nor the properties was Grandma's greatest gift. It was the confirmation that my decisions, principles, and dedication had been recognized, valued, and rewarded. News of the cookbook inheritance quickly traveled like wildfire around Birmingham's close-knit community within hours of the will reading. And the responses were exactly what I had hoped for in terms of validation. That night, Aunt Dorothy, hardly able to contain her awe, called me. "I can't believe it, honey, Selina. Since you were the only person who truly cared about your grandmother, we assumed that she was living off of Social Security and that she was creating an empire, leaving everything to you." Anyone who had seen Vivien's actions during the funeral was aware of the irony. The tale became a local legend in less than a week. While the sister she had pied had suddenly become one of Birmingham's wealthiest young property owners. The granddaughter had unwittingly disregarded millions of dollars of real estate by making fun of her sister's legacy of useless cookbooks. Congratulations from friends, family, and even acquaintances who had heard the tale were ringing my phone. "I've always known that your grandmother thought you were unique. When she contacted me, my old high school instructor informed me. The manner in which you used to discuss those afternoons spent at her home. It was obvious to everyone that you truly valued that time spent together." After years of sharing about her career successes and financial possessions, Vivien had abruptly stopped posting on social media and had fled to Atlanta in disgrace. Instead of celebrating her windfall, her friends, who had gone down to see her, saw her completely lose it and become publicly exposed as someone who had a profoundly faulty understanding of her own family dynamics. The lawsuit she had threatened never came to pass. Her lawyer had reportedly told her that challenging the will would simply lead to costly legal bills and more public humiliation after looking over Grandma's thorough records and the unchangeable nature of the property transfers. Each recipe card had been completed in accordance with Alabama state law, notarized, and filed with the county. The knowledge that my years of dedication had been recognized, appreciated, and rewarded in the most considerate manner possible, however, was more fulfilling than the money. 6 months after the bequest was revealed, I was sitting in the kitchen where my grandmother had taught me those priceless recipes, and I realized how significant the gift she had given me had been. The inheritance did not include the house itself. In order to preserve the core of our family's customs, I used the rental revenue from my houses to buy it from my parents, who had previously owned it. Every month, as I collected rent payments totaling over $35,000, I thought about Vivien's nasty whisper at the burial. Only her old cookbooks were left by Grandma. My financial independence and the evidence of Grandma's extraordinary foresight were both built upon the words that had been meant to degrade me. Although the inheritance had given me alternatives I never would have imagined, I had continued my position as a social worker, at least for the time being. Because the work gave my life purpose beyond the properties. I didn't have to worry about getting paid to take on issues that were important to me. I could donate to organizations that were important to me. I wouldn't have to worry about money while I traveled, went to school, or had a family. Above all, I had preserved Grandma's legacy in the manner she had desired. I maintained the same property management firm that she had, followed her policy of charging reasonable rent to working families, and even set aside a tiny portion of the proceeds to create a scholarship fund for Birmingham's first-generation college students. Now, the recipe box was a noticeable fixture on my kitchen counter. Each card serves as a reminder of the deeper lesson my grandmother had given me, in addition to cooking techniques. That true love and loyalty are always appreciated and rewarded, even when we least expect it, and that the most priceless inheritances are frequently disguised as modest presents. No recipe Grandma had ever taught me to cook had ever satisfied me as much as the delicious taste of justice. Word of her public breakdown at the funeral and her egregious miscalculation of the inheritance values spread throughout Atlanta's professional circles, causing Vivien and her friends to suffer long-lasting social embarrassment. This damaged her reputation as someone who claimed to be successful and sophisticated but had utterly failed to comprehend her own family dynamics. Her earlier boasts about deserving the priceless family assets were dumb and short-sighted when she discovered that her jewelry inheritance, however nostalgic, was worth less than what I now made in rental income every 2 weeks. This realization permanently destroyed her financial ambitions. The relatives who had always valued her accomplishments over my love had to face the fact that Grandma's meticulous evaluation of our personalities had been horribly correct. Vivien, meanwhile, battled the realization that her contempt for family customs had cost her millions of dollars and revealed her to be someone who prioritized appearances over real connections. I thought about how well Grandma had planned this last lesson on the real meaning of family loyalty as I made Sunday supper using her pot roast recipe, the same one that had transferred ownership of a shopping complex valued at over $800,000. Realizing that occasionally letting people show their true selves so fully that justice is served by justice itself might result in more powerful retaliation than our own acts.